My wife cheated on me when the kids were asleep, and I was in Chicago for work. How did I know it? Well, so let me start all over again. Hey there, everyone. This is my first post on Reddit, and honestly, I never thought I'd be sharing my life story like this. But here I am, trying to make sense of it all, and maybe find some support from those who've been through similar situations. So grab a drink, sit back, and let me take you through the mess that has become my life. I've been married to my wife, let's call her Sarah, for about 7 years now. We have 2 beautiful kids, a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. Life was going pretty well for us, or so I thought. We had our ups and downs, but who doesn't, right? A bit of backstory. A few years back, I was in a bad accident that left me with a disability. I can't move around much, and my mobility is limited to a wheelchair or crutches. It was tough on all of us, but I thought we were managing it as a family. Little did I know Sarah had other plans. It all started a few weeks ago. I noticed she was becoming more distant, spending more time on her phone and making excuses to go out. Girls' nights became more frequent, and she'd always seem to have some reason to stay out late. I tried to brush it off, thinking she just needed some time with her friends. Then one night, our son came to me with a confused look on his face. He said, "Dad, some uncle came to see Mom last night. They were arguing in the bedroom." My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I confronted Sarah about it the next day. She denied everything, of course, saying it was just a misunderstanding. But her reaction, the way she got defensive and angry, only made me more suspicious. So, I decided to dig deeper. While Sarah was out one evening, I went through her phone. It wasn't easy given my limited mobility, but I managed. And there it was, VDJ, the proof I didn't want to find. Messages between her and this guy, talking about meeting up and their special moments. My hands were shaking as I read through them. I felt like my whole world was crashing down. Here I was, disabled, and doing my best to keep our family together, while she was out betraying me. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't let this slide. When she got back that night, I showed her the messages. She broke down crying, begging for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake and it wouldn't happen again. But I couldn't trust her anymore. The damage was done. I've contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process. It's going to be a long and painful road, but I need to do what's best for me and the kids. I'm not sure how we'll manage, but we'll figure it out somehow. I won't let her betrayal define us. Thanks for listening, everyone. It feels a bit better just to get this off my chest. If you've been through something similar, I'd appreciate any advice or support you can offer. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Hey Reddit, I'm back. Thanks for all the support and advice on my last post. After moving in with my parents, I thought things might calm down a bit. Boy, was I wrong. Sarah didn't take long to show up at my parents' house. She was furious, yelling about how I took the kids without telling her. My parents tried to calm her down, but it only escalated from there. The first major confrontation happened about a week after I moved in. Sarah showed up unannounced, banging on the door and demanding to see the kids. I had just put them to bed, and the last thing I wanted was for them to witness any more of this chaos. My dad answered the door and tried to talk to her, but she pushed past him and stormed into the house, screaming my name. When I came out to see what was going on, Sarah was in the living room pacing back and forth like a caged animal. I told her to calm down and that we needed to talk like adults. She ignored me and started shouting about how I had no right to take the kids. I tried to explain that I did it to protect them, but she wasn't listening. Then things took a turn for the worse. Sarah's brother Mike showed up. He'd always been protective of his sister, but I'd never seen him this angry. He barged into the house and got right in my face, yelling at me for kidnapping his niece and nephew. I tried to stand my ground, but it's hard to do that when you're in a wheelchair. Mike started shoving me, and my dad had to step in to break it up. Sarah just stood there, watching the whole thing unfold without saying a word. It was like she didn't care about the chaos she was causing. I felt like I was seeing a side of her I'd never seen before, and it scared me. After my dad managed to separate us, I told Sarah we needed to talk outside. She reluctantly agreed, and we went out to the porch. I told her that I couldn't trust her anymore, and that I needed time to figure things out. She started crying, saying she was sorry and that she wanted to work things out. But it all felt so hollow. I didn't believe a word she said. Then she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to take the kids with her. I couldn't believe it. After everything she'd done, She had the nerve to think she could just waltz back into our lives and take the kids. I told her no way, that the kids were staying with me. She got even more upset, saying I was trying to turn them against her. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Sarah kept showing up, trying to see the kids. We had more fights, and each one seemed worse than the last. Mike kept coming over too, acting like he was the hero protecting his sister. I felt like I was under siege in my own parents' house. Meanwhile, I was trying to figure out what to do next. I talked to a lawyer, who told me I had a good case for custody, but it would be a long and ugly battle. I didn't want to put the kids through that, but I also couldn't let Sarah take them. One day, Sarah showed up while the kids were at school. She was calmer this time, and we actually managed to have a somewhat civil conversation. She admitted she'd been seeing someone else but claimed it was a mistake and that she wanted to make things right. I told her it was too late for that, and she started crying again. She begged me to let her take the kids for the weekend. I was hesitant, but I eventually agreed, thinking it might help de-escalate things. Big mistake. When she brought them back, the kids were confused and upset. They didn't understand why Mommy and Daddy were fighting, and it broke my heart to see them like that. I've been trying to be strong for my kids, but it's so hard. Every time I see Sarah, I'm reminded of her betrayal. And every time I look at my kids, I feel like I'm failing them. I'm at my wit's end, and I don't know what to do. After that weekend, things took a turn for the worse. Sarah started showing up unannounced more frequently, often with Mike in tow. It was clear they were trying to wear me down, to make me seem like the unreasonable one. Mike would try to intimidate me, and Sarah would play the victim, crying about how I was keeping her from her children. One night, Sarah showed up at the house after I'd put the kids to bed. She was hysterical, yelling that I was ruining her life and that she needed to see the kids. My parents tried to intervene, but she wouldn't listen. I told her to leave, that it wasn't a good time, but she refused. Mike was with her, and things got heated quickly. He started shouting at me, calling me a coward and a cripple. He said I didn't deserve my family, and that I was just trying to turn everyone against Sarah. It was too much. I felt my temper rising, and before I knew it, we were nose to nose, yelling at each other. My mom tried to step in, but Mike pushed her aside. That was the last straw for my dad. He got between us, telling Mike to get out and take Sarah with him. Mike pushed back, and suddenly they were grappling. I tried to get between them, but it was chaos. The kids woke up and came downstairs crying and scared. It broke my heart to see them like that. My dad managed to push Mike out the door, and I took the kids back to their room, trying to calm them down. Sarah was outside, screaming and banging on the door, but I ignored her. I had to focus on my kids. After that night, I knew I had to take more drastic measures. I talked to my lawyer about getting a restraining order against Mike and limiting Sarah's access to the kids. It wasn't an easy decision, but I had to protect my family. My lawyer agreed it was the right move, given the circumstances. When I told Sarah about the restraining order, she lost it. She accused me of trying to erase her from the kids' lives. She said I was punishing her for one mistake and that I was being cruel, but I couldn't back down. I told her she needed to prove she could be a stable and responsible parent before I'd even consider letting her have unsupervised visits. Sarah's behavior only got worse. She started showing up at the kids' school, trying to talk to them during recess. The school called me several times, saying she was causing a scene and upsetting the kids. I had to talk to the principal and explain the situation. They agreed to keep her away from the kids during school hours, but it was a temporary solution. One afternoon, I got a call from the school. Sarah had shown up again, this time with Mike, and they were demanding to see the kids. The principal had called the police, and I needed to come down to the school. When I arrived, Sarah was outside, arguing with the officers. Mike was standing off to the side, looking smug. I took a deep breath and went inside. The kids were in the principal's office, scared and confused. I hugged them, trying to reassure them that everything would be okay. The principal told me that Sarah and Mike had been making threats, saying they were going to take the kids no matter what. The police escorted them off the property, but I knew this wasn't the end of it. That night, I sat down with my parents and talked about what to do next. We all agreed that I needed to file for full custody and get a restraining order against both Sarah and Mike. It wasn't what I wanted, but I had to protect my kids. Filing for full custody was a long and painful process. I had to document everything VDJ, every fight, every incident at the school, every time Sarah showed up unannounced. My lawyer was great, but it was still exhausting. I felt like I was living under a microscope, and I hated it. Through it all, my kids were my top priority. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for them. We stuck to our routines, and I made sure they knew how much I loved them. But it was hard. They missed their mom, and they didn't understand why she couldn't be around. One evening, after a particularly rough day, my son asked me why mommy didn't live with us anymore. It broke my heart to see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. I tried to explain it in a way he could understand, but it wasn't easy. I told him that mommy and daddy were having some problems, and we needed to live apart for a while. I reassured him that it wasn't his fault, and that we both loved him very much. As the custody battle dragged on, Sarah's behavior became more erratic. She started spreading lies about me to our friends and family, saying I was abusive and controlling. It hurt to hear those things, but I knew the truth. I tried to rise above it and focus on what mattered, VDJ, my kids. One day I got a call from Sarah's brother Mike. He was furious, accusing me of trying to ruin Sarah's life. He said I was poisoning the kids against her, and that I was going to pay for what I was doing. I hung up the phone, feeling sick to my stomach. I knew this wasn't going to end peacefully. A few days later, Sarah showed up at my parents' house with a lawyer. She was demanding to take the kids for the weekend. I refused, saying it wasn't in their best interest. Her lawyer tried to pressure me, saying I was violating her rights as a mother, but I stood my ground. I told them they needed to go through the courts if they wanted to change the custody arrangement. The situation escalated quickly. Sarah started screaming, saying I was a horrible father and that I was ruining our kids' lives. Mike was there too, egging her on. My parents tried to intervene, but it was chaos. The kids were inside, crying and scared. I knew I had to do something. I called the police, explaining the situation. When they arrived, they managed to calm things down and told Sarah and Mike to leave. It was a temporary solution, but it bought me some time to figure out what to do next. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. The stress was taking a toll on me, and I was worried about the impact it was having on the kids. I talked to my lawyer about getting an emergency custody order, and we started the process. As the legal battle continued, I tried to stay strong for my kids. I made sure they knew they were loved and that everything would be okay. But it was hard. The constant tension and conflict were wearing me down. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down and started writing this post. I needed to get it all out, to share my story with people who might understand. I feel like I'm at the end of my rope and I don't know what to do. The next few days were a blur of court documents and lawyer meetings. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case, but it was still a nerve-wracking experience. I knew that if the judge didn't rule in our favor, Sarah could take the kids, and I couldn't let that happen. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. My parents came with me for support, and I was grateful to have them by my side. Sarah showed up with her lawyer and Mike. It took everything in me to stay calm and composed. The hearing was intense. Both sides presented their arguments, and there were moments when I felt like everything was hanging by a thread. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint me as an unfit parent, but we had the evidence to prove otherwise. When it was my turn to speak, I poured my heart out. I told the judge about my accident, my efforts to be a good father, and the lengths I had gone to protect my kids. The judge listened carefully to both sides before making a decision. It felt like an eternity before he spoke, but when he did, it was a relief. He granted me full custody, with supervised visitation for Sarah. It wasn't perfect, but it was a victory. Sarah was furious. She stormed out of the courtroom, with Mike following close behind. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I knew it wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, but at least I'd taken a step in the right direction. I took the kids home and tried to explain what had happened. It wasn't easy, but I did my best to reassure them that everything would be okay. They were still confused and hurt, but I hoped that with time, they would start to heal. Over the next few weeks, I focused on creating a stable and loving environment for my kids. We settled into a new routine, and I tried to keep things as normal as possible. I reached out to a therapist who specialized in working with children, and we started going to sessions together. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. Sarah continued to cause problems. She showed up during her supervised visits, trying to manipulate the situation and turn the kids against me. But the court-appointed supervisor was vigilant, and Sarah's attempts were unsuccessful. One day, after a particularly difficult visit, my daughter asked me why Mommy was so angry all the time. It broke my heart to see her struggling to understand what was happening. I tried to explain it in a way she could understand, but it was hard. I told her that Mommy was going through a tough time and that we needed to be patient and kind. As the months passed, things slowly started to improve. The kids were adjusting to the new normal, and our therapy sessions were helping. I felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. But then, just as things were starting to settle down, Sarah showed up at my parents' house again. This time, she had a new lawyer with her, and she was demanding to take the kids for a week-long trip. I knew this wasn't in the best interest of the kids, and I refused. The situation quickly escalated. Sarah started yelling, accusing me of trying to alienate her from the kids. Mike was there too, shouting and making threats. My parents tried to intervene, but it was chaos. The kids were inside, scared and crying. I knew I had to do something. I called the police again, and when they arrived, they managed to calm things down. Sarah and Mike were told to leave, but it was clear this wasn't the end. I talked to my lawyer about the latest incident, and we decided to file for a permanent restraining order against Mike. It was a difficult decision, but it was necessary to protect my family. The legal battle dragged on, and it felt like it would never end. But through it all, I tried to stay strong for my kids. They were my top priority, and I was determined to give them the stable and loving home they deserved. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down and started writing this post. I needed to get it all out, to share my story with people who might understand. I feel like I'm at the end of my rope, and I don't know what to do. I'm back with another update. I wish I had better news, but things have taken a turn for the worse since my last post. So here's what's happened since my last update. After winning full custody of the kids, I thought things might finally start to settle down. Sarah's visits were supervised, and I was doing my best to create a stable environment for my children. But just when I thought we could move forward, Mike decided to escalate things. One night, about a month after the court ruling, I was at home with the kids. It was late, and they were already in bed. I was sitting in the living room trying to unwind after a long day, when I heard a loud crash from the front door. Before I could react, Mike burst into the house looking furious. He started yelling at me, accusing me of ruining his sister's life and taking her children away from her. I tried to calm him down, but he was beyond reason. He lunged at me, and before I knew it, he was beating me. I couldn't defend myself, VDJ. I was still in my wheelchair from the accident. The pain was unbearable, and I felt completely helpless. The commotion woke up the kids, and they came running down the stairs, screaming and crying. Thankfully, my parents heard the noise from their room and called the police. They arrived quickly and managed to pull Mike off me. He was arrested and taken away, but the damage was done. I was left battered and bruised, both physically and emotionally. Mike was charged with assault and breaking and entering. He was sentenced to a few months in jail, but that didn't make the situation any easier for me or the kids. My life has been turned upside down, and I'm struggling to hold it all together. Parenting has been incredibly hard. The kids are traumatized by what they saw, and they're scared all the time. They don't understand why their uncle, who they used to love, would hurt their dad. I've tried to explain it to them in a way they can understand, but it's tough. They're seeing a therapist regularly, and I'm doing my best to support them, but it's a long road to recovery. Physically, I'm still recovering from the attack. It's hard to move around and take care of the kids when I'm in pain, but I'm pushing through. My parents have been a huge help, but I hate feeling like a burden on them. I want to be able to provide for my kids and give them a normal life, but it feels like I'm constantly fighting an uphill battle. Emotionally, I'm exhausted. Every day is a struggle to keep it together for the kids. I feel angry and betrayed by Sarah and her family, and it's hard not to let that bitterness consume me. I try to focus on the positive moments with my kids, but it's tough when the shadow of what happened looms over us. I've had to take time off work to recover and deal with everything, which has put a strain on our finances. It's been difficult to keep up with bills and expenses, and I'm worried about the future. I'm doing everything I can to provide for my kids, but it feels like it's never enough. Despite everything, I'm determined to keep fighting for my kids. They're my world. and I'll do whatever it takes to protect them and give them a better life. It's not easy, but I have to believe that things will get better eventually. It's been about 2 months since my last post, and things have been a roller coaster. A lot has changed since then. Sarah has moved on and found a new man. From what I've heard, they're often out drinking together, which isn't exactly reassuring. Knowing that she's chosen this path just confirms that I made the right decision to fight for full custody. But it doesn't make things any easier. Living with my parents has been tough. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for their support, but they're not young anymore. They deserve to enjoy their retirement without the chaos of young children in the house. I can see it's wearing on them, and I feel guilty about it. They love their grandkids, but they need their own space and time to themselves. And that's been hard to come by with all of us living under the same roof. My dad has been amazing, stepping in to help wherever he can, but I can see the toll it's taking on him. He's not as strong as he used to be, and the constant stress is affecting his health. My mom tries to keep everything together, but she's exhausted. They both are. I hate feeling like I'm burdening them, but I don't have many options right now. Sarah's new relationship is another stressor. The kids are confused and upset about their mom's new boyfriend. They've mentioned hearing loud arguments and seeing them drink a lot when they've had their supervised visits. It's heartbreaking to see my kids go through this. They deserve so much better. Financially, things are still a struggle. I've been trying to get back to work, but it's hard to balance everything. Between doctor's appointments, therapy sessions for the kids, and just the day-to-day responsibilities, it feels like there's never enough time or money. I'm constantly worried about how we'll make ends meet. Emotionally, I'm drained. I'm trying to be strong for my kids, but some days it feels impossible. The weight of everything is crushing. I miss the simplicity of our old life before the accident, before the betrayal. But there's no going back. I have to keep pushing forward for my kids' sake. I've been thinking a lot about moving out of my parents' house. It's not an ideal situation, but I know it's what needs to happen for everyone's sake. Finding a place that's affordable and accessible, given my disability, is a challenge. I've started looking, but it's slow going. Every time I find something promising, there's a snag VDJ too expensive, not accessible, or in a bad neighborhood. But I'm determined to make it work somehow. In the midst of all this, I've been trying to focus on the positives. The kids and I have grown closer through all of this. We have our routines and little traditions that bring some stability to our lives. I've been trying to make memories with them, doing simple things like movie nights, baking cookies, or playing board games. It's not much, but it's something. I've been following the advice many of you gave about seeking therapy for myself as well. It's been helpful to have someone to talk to help me process everything. I'm trying to take things one day at a time, but it's hard not to get overwhelmed by the big picture. I want to share some things from the stories I downloaded that really resonated with me. Reading about others who have gone through similar situations has been oddly comforting. Knowing I'm not alone in this struggle, that others have faced these challenges and come out the other side, gives me hope. One story that stuck with me was about a guy who, like me, found out his wife was cheating. He talked about the rage and helplessness he felt, much like I did. But he also talked about how he found strength in his children, how they became his reason to keep going. I see that in my own life now. My kids are my anchor, the reason I get up every day and keep fighting. Another story was about a man who had to live with his parents after his marriage fell apart. He described the guilt and frustration of feeling like a burden, which I can relate to all too well. But he also talked about how his parents' support, despite their own struggles, was a lifeline. That's exactly how I feel about my parents. They're doing everything they can to help, even when it's hard for them. I'll keep you updated as things progress. For now, I'm just taking it one day at a time, trying to find a way forward for me and my kids. It's been 4 months since my last post, and I wish I could say things have improved, but honestly, it feels like everything has only gotten worse. First off, Sarah has continued her downward spiral. She's still with her new boyfriend, and they're both drinking heavily. Every time the kids come back from their supervised visits, they're more distressed. They've seen and heard things no child should have to witness. The supervised visits are supposed to be controlled, but Sarah has a way of manipulating the situation, making it difficult for the supervisors to intervene effectively. It's a mess, and it feels like I'm constantly trying to pick up the pieces. Living with my parents has become increasingly difficult. They've been incredibly supportive, but their health is declining. My dad's condition has worsened, and he's had several hospital visits. My mom is exhausted, and I can see the strain this whole situation is putting on her. They deserve to enjoy their retirement without this constant stress and chaos, but instead, they're dealing with the fallout of my broken marriage. Financially, we're in dire straits. I've had to cut back on work significantly to care for the kids and help my parents. The bills are piling up, and I'm constantly worried about how we'll make ends meet. The kids need therapy, I need ongoing medical treatment for my disability, and everyday expenses just keep adding up. It feels like I'm drowning, and there's no way out. Emotionally, I'm at my breaking point. I try to be strong for my kids, but some days it feels impossible. The weight of everything is crushing. I miss the simplicity of our old life, before the accident and the betrayal. But there's no going back. I have to keep pushing forward for my kids' sake. They're my world, and I have to be strong for them, even when I feel like I'm falling apart inside. Finding a new place to live has been an uphill battle. Every place I find is either too expensive, not accessible for my wheelchair, or in a terrible neighborhood. I feel trapped. Moving out of my parents' house is what needs to happen for everyone's sake, but it's hard to see a clear path forward. Sarah has become more vindictive as time goes on. She's been spreading lies about me, telling anyone who will listen that I'm the reason our marriage fell apart. She accuses me of being controlling and unsupportive, painting herself as the victim. It's infuriating and exhausting to constantly defend myself against her lies. The kids are struggling too. They're confused and hurt by their mom's behavior. They ask why mommy is always angry, why she drinks so much, and why she can't be around more. It breaks my heart to see them go through this. They deserve stability and love, and I'm doing my best to provide that, but it feels like an uphill battle. I've been trying to focus on the positives. My kids and I have grown closer through everything. We've developed routines and traditions that bring some stability to our lives. We have movie nights, bake cookies together, and play board games. It's not much, but it helps us feel like a family again. Therapy has been a small light in the darkness. Talking to a professional has helped me process some of the trauma and stress. It's a long road, and I'm trying to take things one day at a time, but it's hard not to get overwhelmed by the big picture. The impact of these events has been profound. My confidence has taken a huge hit. I constantly question myself and my decisions. I worry about my kids and how all of this is affecting them. They're seeing their mom at her worst, and I'm scared about the long-term impact it might have on them. I guess this is where my updates end. I don't have any answers or solutions, just a lot of questions and a heavy heart. I'm doing my best to navigate this mess, but it feels like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's meant more than I can express. I'm going to keep fighting for my kids, for their future, and for some semblance of normalcy in our lives. Thanks for listening, and take care.